All right, and we are live. It is another week of Small Business Solutions Monday with Deborah R. Nelson, and I'm super excited to have our guest today, Elliot Conner, all the way from Australia today, correct?
That's right. Just out of Sydney at the moment.
Yeah, that's super exciting. So for us, it is 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern. For him, it is 11 o'clock a.m. So we are so thankful that he decided to share some of his morning with us. I know he's extremely busy. So I like to always say why I, you know, select certain guests to be on the show and what intrigues me about them. So for Elliot, I would say, first and foremost, he's done so much in such a short lifespan. He's 18. I'm not sure if you had a birthday. Are you still 18?
18. I just turned 18. So
Okay,
yeah.
all right. So when we originally met, you were 17 years old. And at the age of 17, now newly 18 years old, you're a TEDx speaker. You've started a nonprofit business that's stretched over 11 different countries. You have a charity that's stretched over 100 plus volunteers. Please introduce yourself to everyone again, teampreneur. I almost don't even want to give you that title because you've done so much. Would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure. So, I mean, that was a fine introduction. I guess what I do is act as a change maker and conservationist. So, I'm a TEDx speaker, first time author recently, as of this year. I run this charity, Human Nature Projects, which, as you say, has crossed about 100 countries, so 1,500 odd volunteers, and we try and make environmental volunteering much more accessible. So I really enjoy doing that. I'm also an animal rescuer. I host my own podcast called the Human Nature Cast, amongst many other things. So currently moving into wildlife filmmaking.
You are extremely busy. I know people ask me how do I do it? But in a mix of you going to school, right? You're doing all these things, and that is so impressive. And you just won an award early 2020 with Samson Eco Award 2020. Can you tell us about that? What was the requirements? And who was your competition?
Sure. That was just for my work with Human Nature Projects. So, Human Nature Projects has a very strong youth following because typically it's that demographic which is struggling most
Nice.
to engage themselves in this field. It's very mixed. So, we have people right up to retirement age who are keen to make a difference. But that is a strong a part of where Human Nature Projects is run from. That was really nice to gain that recognition. But I think moving forward, it's important that we as Human Nature Projects try and make sure everyone can be empowered in that manner. Human Nature Projects is all about trying to scale others' ideas, solutions, tailoring this environmental volunteering experience so they feel engaged and impactful in their work.
Absolutely. So can you give us a backstory on what inspired you to start this nonprofit and what your experience was like starting it from scratch and now scaling it to several countries?
So the idea for Human Nature Projects came about in January of last year. And at that time, I was volunteering in a rescue and rehabilitation centre for injured wildlife in southern France. So I was over there for about a month, caring for birds of prey, hedgehogs, bats, whatever creatures came into the centre through our doors. But in the time I spent over there, I was also taking what spare time I had to research the operations of about 200 major environmental NGOs. So I'd been volunteering quite extensively on the local scale for several years before that, just trying to make a difference, and found it really difficult. So this was my way of seeing what was going on, both in Australia and especially in the global scale. So I wanted to make a bigger impact, I guess. But what it showed me was that especially some of the larger environmental organizations really struggled to work with members of the public because they just didn't have the capacity, the resources to
Nice.
train and equip them to be of use. These volunteers wouldn't have the skill set to make a difference according to these larger figurehead charities. So Human Nature Projects came about as, I guess, a solution to that, trying to find a way to scale these grassroots model of environmentalism on a global scale,
Nice.
whilst maintaining that community atmosphere, that very decentralized feel, so that everyone could feel like they're making a difference in a really nice manner.
That's awesome. So when did you start this effort? How long ago?
It was in about June, July of last year.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
yeah.
So you've seen massive growth within that time frame. So you just started a little over a year ago, and now you're partnering up with people from different countries that share the same vision and obviously like-minded. So how did you make all those broad connections? I say that because there are plenty of people who have these huge ideas, especially for nonprofits. They're usually like world-changing ideas. How did you become brave enough to connect with people around the world to make this become a reality?
Well, you're right. It is about that courage, that bravery. But I'm an introvert, so that definitely didn't come naturally to me. I
Interesting.
think, yeah, it was definitely something I had to learn. And I've been very fortunate to receive mentorship, to receive some really
Awesome.
great support from the people around me. But in terms of how you do take that leap of faith, it's very much about self-confidence, I found. So if you can have a form of authenticity as a leader, be really open about your own story, your motivation, your drive behind
Nice.
doing this work, especially given it's a charitable work, then that's even more impactful. But I think people were really interested in where I was coming from, and then I grew interested in this vision for Human Nature Projects. So that's how it all came about initially. And obviously now we have national teams in all of these different countries. We have international working groups. So it's very much an organic growth we're now experiencing. But definitely in those early stages, it was about telling my story, reaching out there and speaking to so many other people who resonated with that and had very similar experiences.
That's amazing. Awesome. So how many different partners do you currently have right now?
So, in terms of organizational partners, about 2 dozen, something like that. It's hard to count because
Wow.
on the different scales, we have obviously these national teams, the volunteers in 100 odd countries. So,
Wow.
those units operate sort of semi-independently. They're able to organize actions, campaigns on that national scale, locally with communities. So they're relevant, impactful, and that works really well. I don't micromanage any of them. I speak with the national directors, offer support
Amazing.
advice when I can. But that's sort of self-contained units allows me to keep that oversight role without having to put in all the impossible hours in a day to manage that volume of volunteers.
That is awesome. So I know I keep going on the all the many titles, right? You're author, filmmaker, you have this nonprofit business, you're working with thousands of people. Like this is just like such a huge project. And I love the fact that you hone in on micromanagement. You do not micromanage. So you have processes in place that basically operates your nonprofit organization when you're asleep because you have to sleep at some point.
Definitely, yeah. So part of my learning curve in starting Human Nature Projects was after several very intensive months working 5 to 9 midnight webinars, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., etc.,
Wow.
getting very little sleep. Then yeah, you obviously do have to set those mechanisms in place. So it had scaled, grown dramatically in that period, but then making sure we have volunteers step up to lead in their own countries and oversee some of the international affairs as well. So that's definitely been something I've got much better at.
Okay, awesome. Now, from a aspiring entrepreneur perspective, I know anyone that may be watching this right now might be thinking, well, how can I start my own nonprofit? And the number one thing that stops most people is funding. So did you have to like step out on personal funds initially? Did you get grants? How was your funding for your nonprofit organization? And what would you tell any aspiring entrepreneurs that may be sitting on their idea because they don't know how to get started?
It's interesting that you raised that. I've been doing quite a lot of presentations, lectures recently about these barriers in the way of participation of especially young entrepreneurs, environmentalists, etc. I really think financial shouldn't be one that holds you back. It's definitely one. Many people quote, you're right. It's one of those main inhibitors. But of all the different challenges you can face, that should be one of the least important, in my belief.
I
So
like that.
to
Okay.
contextualize that with human nature projects, obviously entirely run by volunteers. I've never earned a cent for the work I do, but that means we don't really need any operating costs whatsoever. We didn't receive any financial support for months into its operations. It's essentially operated as a community, an association is what it is, but that allowed it to create an impact, create change without having to get bogged down, as you say, in that financial side of things. Obviously, that's not a model that will work with all business and enterprise, but there are many, many workarounds which we found just doing this work with human nature projects and all across this social entrepreneurship space, which can allow you to find the resources you need, however that may be. But obviously, there are many other challenges that people face. So the knowledge gap is a big one we're working to try and overcome with human nature projects, making sure people are equipped, empowered with some of the know-how. Another one is credibility, actually, faced by youth quite often. People don't believe they have the gravitas to set up something of any scale, which is a misconception, but a powerful one nonetheless. So, yeah, there are many, many barriers, but most of them psychological. So if you can
I like
have
that.
that self-confidence, then definitely push ahead.
Nice. And I think the mindset shift, you're right on it. Most of your challenges are psychological. So if you can just get your mindset in the right direction, you basically can overcome anything and start it. Awesome. That's great words of advice. So right now with your nonprofit, what does your day-to-day look like with your organization? What are you guys working on? Current focus?
Oh, what's the day to day? I wish it were that regular. So I speak with the national directors every fortnight, every 2 weeks. Between those times, essentially, they're doing their own thing. So, I mean, it's great hearing from them what they're up to. I often chat with them in between, provide what support I can. But some of the things they get up to, it's all range, all manner. I received a picture on WhatsApp just before hopping on this call from our national director in Uganda, who's been doing some tree planting. And it's a very low definition, blurred, silhouetted, far off picture of a monkey high up in a tree. And he asked me, what species is this? So it's something I love about being a naturalist and ecologist. People just assume I have this magical ability. But anyway, I gave it my best shot. So they've over in Uganda, they've just got a land grant and they're planting several thousand trees down borders on Lake Victoria. So doing reforestation down there, working with community, all that jazz. I was talking with our national director in Kazakhstan yesterday. So in Kazakhstan, they've been working with schools, doing a program to raise awareness about, I think, a dozen national parks, between half a dozen and a dozen national parks they have in the country. So making a slide deck about each of them, saying what's there, all about it, and also raising awareness about face masks, that pollution impact, which has risen due to COVID.
Yes.
So They've just released a video on that. I was watching it, but all manner of things. And I could go across 100 countries, list you all of them, but often I'm taking a very back seat in terms of works on that scale. And then we have the international working groups, which are organized according to skills or interests our volunteers may have, and they have their own projects they're working on. So whatever that may be, if it's on an educational domain, that working group just created a toolkit to help teachers and principals create school clubs for these communities. But there's a dozen of those as well, which are doing their own thing.
Holy wow. My head is just spinning on all the things that you guys have going on. That is amazing. So for Human Nature Projects, I remember like at the conclusion of our conversation back in July-ish, I was like, hey, do you have a read ahead? Because I want to educate myself on what we're going to talk about. But I will say that you have the ability to explain it to just about anyone. I'm definitely following along with the conversation, but this isn't usually my field of interest. But somehow you've developed that interest. So how do you connect with those who are interested in your projects, your human nature projects? Do you have like seminars? Do you give them pamphlets? How do you educate them to kind of like catch up to speed with the rest of you and your partners?
Well, I think that's the beauty of the model, actually, because we have so many of our volunteers who are leading various aspects of it. They're able to onboard volunteers, explain what's happening locally or on the international scale, whatever it may be. But all of our volunteers are very engaged, interested in what's going on. So often they can piece it together. We've got various networks, communities where they can chat and co-create solutions in that manner. Which is really interesting, quite impactful. So it's all manner of things in terms of how it's set up, coordinated, but very much creating that natural flow, those natural cycles of ideas, processes, which we're trying to create, replicate. So that's sort of how it fits together.
So it almost seems like you guys are pretty fluid, like you're flexible. Someone comes on board, they kind of have the base knowledge and the interest. You're like, hey, but what can you bring to the table? It sounds like you're bringing folks in and they're able to put a little bit of themselves into your nonprofit organization. Is that how
Definitely.
it is? Yeah?
Yeah, so how it should be is a volunteer wants to create an impact, wants to save the world in a given manner, and we're trying to support them in that. So for me, I mentioned I'm trying to move into filmmaking. It's a skill set I want to develop. So if I were to be entering human nature projects at this time, we'd be connecting myself up with the media working group. We may be launching a video campaign in a national Australian team. But whatever that may be, I'd contribute that skill set, that interest, that passion, which I have to the team.
That's awesome. That's marvelous. I'm a huge studier of entrepreneurs and business owners, and every single time I get a new guest, there's like another set of skills brought to the table. So can you kind of explain, if you don't mind, growing up, did you have this huge dream to start this nonprofit or to start something that was going to be world changing, or did you just fall into it? I'm curious to know.
Absolutely not. No, nothing could be further from the truth. I've always been interested in nature, fascinated by animals, the great outdoors. So that I might have known at a younger age, perhaps. That was what drove me, motivated me. But that I would start up a charity at this scale. No clue before I did it. Even when I started Human Nature Projects, I wouldn't imagine it would grow that large.
Interesting.
So it was only a few months down the line that you sort of realize how big this could be, where it's going. And then it's all about adapting, evolving, working with that, and trying to somehow work out how this can scale up and be sustainable at the same time. So it's quite the juggling act.
Wow.
But yeah, I mentioned in that time in France, I came up with a lot of the groundwork, the philosophy. So that was all sort of wishy-washy ideas until I had the space and time, almost 6 months down the line, to start Human Nature Projects. And that was a different process in itself. but it's all a gradual build up for me. So, I mean, the year before I started Human Nature Projects, I was starting up, launching a field naturalist club in Sydney.
Okay.
So, leading monthly meetings and just taking people around, showing them birds, animals, explaining what's what, and sharing that passion with others. So, that was sort of my small scale leadership, and then launching it on the global scale. But I mentioned I've just been very fortunate with the support I've received, and having that passionate community of individuals around me, I think has allowed Human Nature Projects to become what it is.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, with everything that's going on with COVID, has that had any impact on your current, I guess, your plans, your events? I'm sure if you guys have events planned, but how are you guys pivoting during this season?
It's been really interesting for me. So,
Okay.
I guess speaking with the national directors every fortnight, hearing how COVID's sort of coming and going in different countries. When it first sort of broke out on that global scale, there was a few weeks, almost a month before it hit some of the African countries very badly. So there's been all sorts of situations across the globe. I remember a few months back, we had a meeting where Team Nepal, Team Morocco were still in very harsh lockdowns. So it's all manner of different situations which our national teams are trying to deal with. So working out different strategies, which activities will have to move online, which ones could still be run with communities, and we're still doing some on the ground in countries where COVID has abated or not had such an impact. So it's, I guess, a proof of the resilience, the fluidity was the word mentioned earlier of this network. So I think that's something which has been brought to the fore, perhaps unexpectedly, due to the current situation and with Human Nature Projects.
Absolutely. And I agree. I cannot agree with you more. Resilience has definitely been tested in 2020. So I think looking at it from a different perspective, instead of like, hey, how has COVID impacted or, has caused, maybe some issues within business processes, we can look at it from a different perspective and say, how has COVID helped us? It shows us where our gaps are in our businesses. It shows us what areas we need to strengthen in our business model and things. And if you didn't have a business model, you're like, now I know I need one for times such as this. And for you, it might not have been such of a big deal in Australia. However, you're working with different people from around the world. So someone somewhere on your team was impacted, so in a mix of it all, again, being 18 years old, I don't know, are you in college or are you in your last year of high school?
Just graduated from high school.
Oh wow, this summer. I'm
about 2 weeks ago.
Oh my gosh. So what's next? Are you going to college? Are you 100% into your nonprofit? What are your plans? This is so exciting. I get so excited.
It's hard to say. Yeah, hard to say due to coronavirus, everything that's caused. And most likely I'll take a gap year. So I enter the workforce, set some more time aside to run Human Nature Projects, scale that, sustain that further. And I mentioned doing more filmmaking, so storytelling in this environmental domain, run some other things. So I'm writing a second book, all sorts of bits and pieces, projects I'd like to get on with. But then, to uni, probably UK, US. I'd like to go abroad, and we'll see where all that leads.
That's amazing. Again, you've done so much. I thought I did a lot. No, you've done so much, and it's very inspiring for people your age to see like it definitely can be done. You don't have to wait until you're in your 20s or until you graduate high school. You started this while you were in high school. So you're well above your in as far as wisdom, you're very wise for your age. So wow. So what advice do you have for teenpreneurs, teenagers who are thinking about starting business or a nonprofit, but they're like, hey, I'm still in high school. Let me finish school first. Is it doable? If you had to do it again, would you?
Oh, definitely. So Founding Human Nature Projects has transformed my life in so many ways and allowed me to transform countless others. So it's definitely worth it as a journey. And I think we mentioned earlier in the conversation, it's all about having that faith in yourself, that
Yes.
belief that you can make a difference. What I'd say is if you have this idea, this vision, this concept, and you can express that, share that with others, then start telling your story, work out who can be part of this core team, this tribe, this community you're creating. And once you have that groundwork set, by all means, take that leap of faith, put yourself out there and try and make something big, because you never know where it will lead, honestly.
Yes. Well, I'm definitely going to be tracking your success. I'm definitely sure you have more coming your way. You started so early, and I mean, you're going to do nothing but great things moving forward. And the people that you're impacting, and the animals, and I mean, that is so. I recently, I don't talk about this often, but I just lost my dog back in June-ish, and that was a huge part of my life. Like, she was a part of my family. So to see that you're doing such great things for animals, had this been a year ago, I wouldn't have like really truly understand. But someone has to take care of our wildlife. Someone has to do it. So I'm glad that you're taking a leap on that. That's awesome. It's such a unique niche. Cool.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I love the work I do. That's what I'm passionate about. So it doesn't feel like work at all.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So is there anything else you would like to say to anyone that's maybe seeking out, wanting to do some volunteer work with your human nature projects? How can
Yeah,
they
you can find out more about Human Nature Projects on our website. That's humannatureprojects.org. Very simple. My website is elliotconner.com, or you can check out our podcast, which is just called Human Nature, or the Human Nature Cast, wherever you get your podcasts.
Awesome. Awesome. So you guys know exactly where to contact Elliot Conner. He's doing wonderful things for this world, not just his community. This is a worldwide impact. And thank you, Elliot, so much for tuning in from Australia. And, again, it's 11 o'clock, 11:27 your time now. And we are very thankful for the wisdom that you share with nonprofits, human nature projects, and all the things. So much success with your endeavors, and I hope to see more of you.
Thank you, Deborah. It's been great speaking. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.